Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. I'm Rich Eisen. I am the editor-in-chief of Capital Weekly here in Sacramento. I've been a reporter for a long time now, about 30 years, and with Capital Weekly for quite a bit of that now. Before we get into this discussion, we're going to take a moment here and introduce everybody. Down to my far right is Peter Jaworski, who's a teaching professor of strategy, ethics, and economics and public policy at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business, whose research interest focuses on ethics and economics of the global plasma industry, which I know is why you're all here. We're also joined by Dr. James Knowles, to my immediate right, who's Vice President of Global Regulatory Policy at the Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association, bringing nearly 2 decades of experience in plasma-derived medicines to guide research, regulatory strategy, and industry standards across the U.S., Europe, and beyond. That is a lot. Thank you for being here. Of course, the patient perspective is critically important, so thank you very much, Casey Kelly, for joining us today. Your story is really interesting. We had a call about this last week. You've got a really interesting story. She lives with, and I hope I pronounced this right, alloimmunization, and has firsthand experience with plasma-derived medicines. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. I guess we're going to start with some questions here. So, James, we're going to start with you. Because help ground us a little bit in the basics here, okay? For those who may not be familiar, like me, what is plasma? What I know about plasma is I have some, and I'm glad of that. Can you walk us through what the plasma donation process looks like today?
Absolutely. I firstly want to thank everybody for the invite. This is the second one of these type of events I've done. Originally from England, but I'm a California native. I've worked for one of the biggest plasma collectors and manufacturing companies that are based in Southern California. So I have a strong affinity for certainly California's impact in collection, plasma collection and medicine manufacture. I'll start with what plasma is, right? We all have blood. We've all probably donated blood. Some of us may have donated plasma. Typically, the part of the blood that contains all the proteins that fight infections, that help our bodies heal, that fight bleeding disorders, that fight protein deficiencies, all those proteins are contained within the plasma part of our blood. Now, what does typically the manufacturing companies do? They take the plasma from the blood, they make sure and they run it through a very complex manufacturing process to take protein A, protein B, protein C for the different types of medicines, such as immunoglobulins, albumins, antihemophilic factor, all proteins which help our body fight various parts of our immune response. Plasma donation in itself is relatively straightforward. I think I'll talk a little bit more about the regulatory structure after this, but essentially the process involves taking blood out of the donor, spinning that blood down where it separates the actual red blood cells, keeps them safe. The plasma then moves into a separate plastic sterile bottle, and then the red blood cells go back into the donor. And that cycle is usually repeated a few times, and then the donation ends. The donor is given saline to make sure they're hydrated, to make sure they've recovered well through the procedure, and then the plasma unit is then moved through, to be frozen and to be ready for manufacturing. So, the actual process takes around 35 to 40 minutes, but obviously there's a lot of donor screening and safety checks that the companies perform, which add to the safety of the process.
And I just want to clarify, because we hear the term source plasma, that you're just talking about plasma that comes from a donor, not something that's made.
Yeah, we classify this as source plasma. Recovered plasma, I will differentiate, is actually a process where whole blood is donated and the plasma is physically recovered and separated at a different facility, a manufacturing facility, a laboratory or a thing. But it's essentially the same thing. It's from human donations, regardless of whether it's source or whether it's recovered plasma.
James, let's stay with you. Can you speak about the safety regulations around this process?
Yeah, so it starts with the donor. Obviously, there are regulations that cover how safe the donor needs to be, but it also ends with how safe the patient needs to be, right? So we have Casey here as a patient. I've met many patients over the years that, without doubt, without question, go through their injection procedure to make sure that the medicines they receive are intravenously, for example, given to them. And they don't have to worry about the regulations, because ultimately the safety is designed with the regulations in mind. From the plasma perspective, the collection perspective, the donors are screened to make sure that they are eligible, safe, they are not high risk to distribute any viruses within the human systems, as well as make sure that their health and safety is maintained throughout the donation process. We also do a vast amount of testing, not just on the donors, on the plasma, but throughout the manufacturing process to make sure that the medicine has all the chemical attributes it needs, all the protein attributes it needs, and most importantly, it is free from any viruses, and make sure ultimately it's going to be safe for patients at the end. And all these are covered through not only FDA regulations, but state regulations, California regulations, and for some of the global companies, global regulations such as those aligned with European Medicines Agency. So it's a very complex regulatory framework that a typical organization has to follow, because it's not just about the plasma, it's about the finished product as well.
How does California framework compare with global? Is it pretty on par?
So I would separate it into kind of, we call it good manufacturing practice, right? And these are pieces throughout the collection process and the manufacturing process that are designed to make sure the donor and the patient are safe throughout everything I've just explained. Within the US, we have the FDA, and they have something called the Code of Federal Regulations that cover this entire process, from documentation to donor collection. Now, within each state within the US, there are variations. Over the past few years, PPTA has worked hard, for example, in Pennsylvania, in Connecticut, in Louisiana, to align some of the differences in the state regulations to federal regulations. The main differences, high level, are the fact that some of the states kind of treat plasma centers, source plasma centers, the same as blood donation centers. So they have very specific requirements on medical personnel, on donation frequencies, etc. And our role is to try and align the reality of the federal regulations and how they work to the state practices. And that's such an example that we're talking about today.
Right, so that's why what happens here in California matters well beyond California borders. That's
Yes.
Peter, plasma, we come to you here, isn't just a life sciences product. It's very personal, it's labor intensive, globally significant. What are your thoughts on all of this stuff?
Yes, it's all of those things. It's personal for me too. At the back there, by the way, you'll see a copy of my report. If you want some of the data that I'll talk about today, you can pick up a copy of that report and take a look through it yourself. It's personal for me because I'm Canadian. And my journey in plasma started 11 years ago because my home country of Canada was having a big debate about whether or not it's okay, morally okay, to pay people to donate plasma. Yeah? And as I was digging into that, I was first of all surprised by the nature of the debate. So the way that the debate was happening in Canada, but in other countries as well, is people were talking about altruism and they were talking about community solidarity. So they said things like people should donate plasma out of the kindness of their heart rather than out of a regard for the thickness of their wallet. Or like the point of plasma donation is to make sure that we stitch each other together in like bonds of community or something like that. And as an ethicist myself, I was a little bit taken aback and a little bit confused. Because we usually begin with the point and purpose of these organizations, of these institutions. And the point of plasma collection is not to give you or me an opportunity to express our altruism. It's not about stitching us together in like bonds of community solidarity. It's about making sure that every single patient who relies on a medicine made from plasma has access to that medicine. And from that perspective, I was like, this is the way that we should evaluate these systems. From a moral perspective, do they collect enough to meet the needs of their own patient community? Are they reliant on other countries? So digging into it, I discovered that Canada was overwhelmingly dependent on plasma donated in the United States of America. In fact, more than 80% of the medicines that Canadian patients depended upon, they were donated by donors in the United States, over 80%. I later discovered that the United States is alone responsible for somewhere near 70% of the entire world's supply of plasma. The whole world. The United States, with 5% of the global population, last year donated enough to make up 68% of the whole world's plasma supply. Canada's not alone. Australia doesn't collect enough plasma to meet the needs of their own patient community, so they depend on the United States. New Zealand doesn't collect enough. France doesn't collect enough. Italy doesn't collect enough. Japan doesn't collect enough. None of these countries collect enough. If you look at the European Union as a whole, they are about 40% dependent on plasma donated in the United States. So that, I thought, was pretty shocking and surprising. And those facts led me to kind of dig in a little bit more into the world of blood and plasma. And actually, when I looked at like the individual states in the United States, I found that there are disparities here too. And I was surprised. We're here in California. I expected California to be a kind of leader in the United States, but California is not a leader. I mean, in one sense, California is a leader. There are 65 plasma collection centers here in California. That makes it third in the US after Texas with 186 and Florida with 92. But if you go per capita on a population basis, California falls to the bottom 10%. There's a plasma center for every like 1.2 million residents of California. In a place like Texas or Utah or Idaho, you get like 7.1 centers per million people. So California, who prides itself, and I think appropriately, on being a leader in the life sciences and in the health industry, is so far behind when it comes to collecting plasma. In fact, California is like Canada. It's like France. It's like Spain. Namely, California doesn't even collect enough plasma to meet the needs of like the patients in this state. So California depends on plasma donated in Texas, in Florida, in Idaho, in Iowa, in order to meet the needs of California patients. And from a personal perspective, I just as I think that like Canada needs to change things, and so do all those countries in the European Union, they need to adjust their regulations to make it easier for people to donate plasma and to have more plasma centers. So California needs to change some rules too.
And I'd just like to add to what Peter said, right? The percentage, we're talking about plasma collection, but if you think also about what I talked about, the entire supply chain of being able to get the medicine to the patients. Southern California, even Northern California, is what I would call a fractionation hub. So fractionation is the manufacturing process. There are giant warehouses throughout California that store the plasma, and then they move to the manufacturing. Now, even though this is a global supply chain, and plasma, as Peter said, moves from the US to different parts of the world, that plasma is only going to stay frozen unless you can manufacture it into the medicines. So I think in terms of the supply chain and ease of the supply chain, having the physical supply in California is also able to feed the manufacturing facilities that are able to manufacture the products and release the products that can be distributed within California, within the US and beyond. So that's how it kind of goes hand in hand, really.
Yeah.
You would think us being behind Idaho would be a big motivating factor here in this building. Casey, let me turn your way here, because this is also very personal to you, probably more so than anybody in the room. Because tell us about your daughter, who was born with HDFN, and for folks like me, please explain what that is, and your experience with plasma-derived medicines.
Okay, so I'll start with my experience with plasma-derived medicines because it's pretty unique. In my first pregnancy, I was told that I had an Rh negative blood type and that I needed an Rh immune globulin shot, which is a plasma-derived medicine. But I didn't know exactly what that meant. I just kind of, trusted my doctors and went on my way. My first pregnancy was fine, delivered perfectly. I later learned that I had maternal alloimmunization. You pronounced it perfectly earlier, by the way. But that is when a pregnant person's immune system creates antibodies against the red blood cells of the baby that they're carrying. So the antibodies can cross the placenta and attack the baby, which can lead to HDFN, which is hemolytic disease of the fetus in newborn It can lead to anemia, jaundice, heart failure, stillbirth, and even infant death if it's improperly monitored and not treated correctly. So because the antibodies usually take time to develop, again, my first child was born healthy, was unaffected, but my second pregnancy, my routine antibody screen at 27 weeks came back positive and showed that I had anti-D and anti-C as well, antibodies at a high enough level that put my baby at risk of HDFN.
Well, so what happened with your daughter? First of all, let's do that. And really, what's the impact on your family?
Absolutely. So my daughter, Allison, was born at 38 weeks, and she was born with pretty moderate HDFN. She was under a week of triple photolite therapy, which treats the jaundice. And then at 12 days old was her first blood transfusion. And then she had a second one at 28 days old, which was followed by Epogen injections, which stimulated her red blood cell growth on its own. And it was just a really hard experience to be in the hospital for that long with my older daughter, who was still young, 18 months. My daughter at home, my family at home. We couldn't be at home together. And then also just watching this little baby get an IV and blood. So it was difficult.
Yeah, I think all of us who are parents can relate to that. Given that experience, tell us why the plasma donation process is still so important to you today.
So I think it's very important because even though technically my rig dose did fail, it's the only prevention that moms like me who are Rh negative, it's the only prevention option that they have to try and prevent these antibodies from even forming or crossing the placenta and attacking their baby, who again can lead to HDFN. So it's just really important for me. I'm trying to donate as much plasma that I can because I do have these anti-D antibodies now, that it can go to create more plasma-derived medicines, RIG, to hopefully prevent other moms from even developing this or having to worry about it.
Sure. Peter, we're going to move back to you. You've recently published a couple of reports about plasma.
Yeah.
Let's start with one of them, which is America's plasma contribution to the world. Now, you were talking about this a little bit already.
Yeah.
Can you maybe walk us through some of those key findings from that report, and specifically, for today's purposes, where California fits in all of that?
Well, good. I mean, I have a copy of it here just to get the numbers exactly right. In 2025, the United States donated 62.5 million liters of plasma. That's an enormous volume of plasma. It's more than anywhere else in the world. The United States had, at the end of 2025, 1,247 plasma collection centers. That's more than twice the rest of the world combined. Right? In terms of the economic impact of these plasma collection centers, they represented about $10 billion for local communities, local economies. The amount of money that the plasma centers gave to donors last year in 2025 was $4.7 billion with a B dollars. $4.7 billion. To give you a sense of like just how much money that is, the federal low-income home energy assistance program, the budget last year was $4.1 billion. $4.7 billion is an incredible amount of money. Last year, the volume of raw human plasma that was exported from the United States, the value of that was $6.2 billion. Now, all of these numbers are in the report at the back. Now, you asked about California in particular. By the way, I have like a chart showing the growth in the plasma donation centers in the United States. We can take a look at that if you're interested in that. In terms of California and the amount of money that donors received last year, let's see if I can find it in time. I don't know if I have it here. I think it's $283 million that the state of California, that donors in the state of California received for donating plasma. Yeah, I don't have it here. Yeah. which is quite a large sum of
Mhm.
money. And by the way, there were 2 recent studies that just were published. One shows that the use of payday loans declines by nearly 10% when a plasma center opens in a neighborhood. The other one shows that the crime rate decreases by more than 10% when a plasma center opens in the neighborhood. During the Q&A, if you're interested about the details in either of those studies or any of the numbers that I'm giving you, feel free to ask about those.
Well, along those lines, so if if Texas and Florida and Idaho and others are doing better than us, what are they doing better? Why are they outperforming California in this area?
Well, Texas has more streamlined rules for opening plasma collection centers. Maybe James can say a bit more about this as well, but that's the basic answer. There's 65 plasma collection centers here. If California were to follow a model closer to Texas or closer to Florida, California would have 200 plasma collection centers, if not more, in a very short amount of time. California would collect enough plasma to meet the needs of their own patient community and also help my family, my friends in Canada. Thank you for donating plasma, by the way, to anybody who's watching, especially from Canada. Roll up your sleeve, donate plasma. But you can help people in Canada, in Australia, in Japan, and also your neighbors when you donate plasma here in the US.
Learning lessons from Texas. It's a new day.
Actually, before this started, I had an interview with somebody from Texas, and I always enjoy being able to tell people in Texas, I'm in California, and you're doing so much better than California is. Right?
That'll get you a free beer a lot of places.
But maybe not here in California.
Not here.
I'm not making
that might
friends
get you
here,
escorted
but
out of the building, right?
if anybody's watching from Texas,
Well,
you owe me a beer.
Yes, we're going to vouch for him on that one.
Yeah, okay,
James, let's move to you here because obviously we're here at the Capitol. So let's talk about legislation because we know there is legislation that's been introduced here in California to help improve California's plasma infrastructure. Why don't you give us a little bit of an update on where we're at with that?
Yeah, I'm in the very fortunate position that I've had my time in industry to understand the practical impact of legislation, whether it's at a state level or whether it's by the WHO or whether it's by EMA or FDA, right? So we've introduced AB 2009. I think it's Assemblyman Chen and Solage who are supporting this. High level, it's really designed, as I said earlier, to align the California kind of clinical and lab requirements, blood bank requirements that are going to align greater to the federal regulations in the US level. I want to come back to what I just said about the implications of that. If one center or a handful of centers has to do something very, very differently in California compared to another series of states, it limits the amount of plasma where that plasma can go. At a global level, if you think about it, a center, and I know this, a center in Bakersfield, for example, has to have European inspectors to come in, give them the thumbs up to say, how you do things in Bakersfield is good for us. Therefore, that plasma, when it's manufactured in California, can then go to help patients in Europe, for example. These global companies that are our members of PPTA and we advocate for have to think with that level of complexity. If I think about, I've been in donor centers in 7 different countries, from China to Germany to the US to Canada, and I can tell you categorically when a good center is running well, the regulations are all the same, right, in terms of how they do things, how they think about things. So what we're really pushing for is an alignment of California's recognition of the uniqueness of how plasma is collected, and ultimately a recognition of how plasma is such a unique raw material that is used into the medicines, for example, for Casey and for millions of other patients around. So,
how much variation, for just 1 second, is there between California regulations and maybe other states or feds that this bill in particular maybe could address?
So I'll give you an example at national level. Firstly, a lot of the regulations around California are centered on clinical labs and the medical oversight, so a specific medical experience and oversight. We had an issue with a CMS a few years ago with the CLIA, and they kind of wanted to make a carte blanche regulation change requiring pathologists to be their medical directors for donor centers. This not only had a tremendous impact to our industry, where we have to have a center medical director to oversee all operations in the plasma collection center, but it had a really bad ripple effect to the clinics and hospitals that needed actual pathologists to do that. There became a shortage. So we were able to overturn that, and that really helped not only the plasma centers maintain operations, be able to expand, because the more plasma we need right now, the more indications, but also have that regulatory kind of harmonization and consistency that allowed centers to operate and maximize their ability to collect plasma. So,
got it. So if California modernized its regulatory framework, what would you say success would look like in, say, 3 to 5 years?
probably shouldn't say like Idaho, right?
Not like Idaho. Better than Idaho. That's what we're after.
Yeah, it's like Texas. I think a recognition of the uniqueness of what we do in the source plasma community especially. I think we've all given blood. Most of us have given blood. Regulations, federal regulations only allow you to give blood every 8 weeks. That's because you're taking everything out of you. You're draining yourself every 8 weeks. With plasma, the proteins and the fluids regenerate over a matter of days, and that's why the FDA allow plasma donors to donate up to twice a week, every week for a year, so up to 104 times a year, because they recognize the controls. For California, it's not necessarily a frequency problem, it's a medical oversight problem, as I came to. So I think if we were to move forward with this act, it would allow the companies, further new companies, to be able to open donor centers. I mean, I'm from the greater Los Angeles area, and I can count 6 or 7 donor centers. That's it, in that entire sprawling metropolis that is Los Angeles. And a lot of that is because of the fiscal responsibility of the companies, the need to have certain types of medical oversight and expertise. And at the end of the day, we've had some successes in California. We were able to remove the need to have registered nurses perform certain functions in plasma centers several years ago, because we explained to the state, to the Department of Health, the differences and the training and the oversight that as a GMP, as a manufacturing organization have. So that's going to be a big push, alignment to more of the federal way of doing things.
And how about the role of technology? We like to think we are the technology hub of the planet here. What role maybe would technology play in this assessment?
Yeah, I think it already is. A lot of companies have automated systems. These are systems that control donation frequency, the volume that the donor can donate, the questions that have to be asked, and these are all controlled under standardized technological systems and programs. So I think by again removing that layer of irrelevant from a medical discipline perspective, and allowing people who are trained and have done this for years and trained in a quality kind of environment, the technology becomes almost it is an automatic, and then it becomes an irrelevance piece for them. So
Casey, let me come back over to you, because what would happen to patients like yourself and your daughter if access to plasma-derived medications is delayed or interrupted? I mean, what's the impact on your life if something like that happens?
I would fear that patients like me who would rely on this plasma-derived medicine like RIG, they would face traumatic experiences like what I went through. It's the only prevention that they can have to not form antibodies like I did. And RIG has also experienced shortage in the past, and that's scary to me that we won't have enough doses for pregnant people who are Rh negative, and that's just one example. There are other individuals with rare and chronic diseases who need plasma way more often, plasma medications way more often than a pregnant mother who's Rh negative.
Right. obviously here today, but are you involved with other advocacy or awareness efforts?
Absolutely. I joined Cal Plasma as an ambassador to share my story and highlight the importance of a strong plasma ecosystem here in California. I also work closely with the Aloe Hope Foundation and support mothers who have babies with HDFN and kind of walk them through my experience and what they're going through. And I also help any mothers, especially anti-D, who are wanting to donate their plasma for the production of plasma-derived medications like RIG, like myself, going to donate their plasma and just coordinating to send them to the certain specialty plasma centers that will create the plasma-derived medicines.
Sure. These kinds of things, like the experience you went through with your daughter, and even after the fact, these are life-changing in so many ways. How did your experience change the way that you look at both donation and then the advocacy role that you've taken on since then?
Absolutely. I didn't even know that plasma donation was a thing before I had my daughter and learned what RIG is and where it came from, and what it does on such a large scale. And again, my population is actually a small portion of what plasma medications are made in everyday life and other conditions, treat other conditions. But it's definitely very personal to me now, knowing that I have anti-D plasma and I can change lives and change the future for at least other Rh-negative mothers and things like that. And advocacy, I'm totally new into this role, but I had to advocate when my daughter was born to ensure that she got the right care that she needed. And now there's tons of other moms who are going through this disease, alloimmunization, and they don't know where to go or where to turn. So it's great that I'm able to help them kind of along their journey too.
You might have heard being a mother of young children is kind of time consuming.
A little bit.
A lot of things on your plate. What keeps you motivated to keep coming out and sharing your story and being involved in advocacy?
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, it's my two daughters. They're 3 and 5, and they're vibrant young girls, and just showing them that we can make a difference and just share our story. And then, like I said, I think it's just the other moms who are going through this and are scared and need a friendly face to kind of turn to and guide them on a scary journey. And so we're taking our scary journey and what we've learned and turning it into something powerful.
Just out of curiosity, when you talk to other moms about this, what kind of reaction do you get?
Oh, that I've been through it? Oh,
Well, and about this, I mean, do they go, hey, I'm going to go donate some plasma, like right now?
Yes. So in my population, I would say it's a pretty specific. You have to have anti-D antibodies to make the RIG injection for the Rh-negative mother. So it's a pretty small population, I would say. But yeah, it's definitely inspiring to go donate blood and plasma, and we need it. But yeah, other moms and like my friends just can't believe what I've been through with my daughter, and here we are today.
Here we are today. What did I do here? Sorry, did I lose my spot? I'm not lost my spot. Peter, I know we were going to come back to you here, so, here we are.
Okay.
I knew we were coming back to you, I knew that much. So we were talking earlier about your report, and you walked us through a little bit of one of them. Can you talk about the other report that you had on donation?
Yeah,
Safety,
okay. The most recent report is on the safety of plasma donation. And basically I go through the entire world, or not the entire world, but the European Union, the United States of America, and then some more specific countries like France. And I look at the rates of adverse events that occur in those different countries, and what you discover is that plasma donation is extraordinarily, inordinately safe. James can speak more to this if you'd like, but that's basically the bottom line message about plasma donation. By the way, anybody donate plasma here? Okay, yeah. What about blood? Blood? Yeah, yeah. So if you've donated blood, you'll kind of have you'll know what donating plasma is like. And by the way, they were talking about the new technology that's out. It used to be the case that you would sit in a chair for 45 minutes, you squeeze the ball, the blood goes out, the machine spins it, keeps the plasma, returns the red and white blood cells and the platelets back to you, right? But now the new machines, some of them 35 minutes in a chair, so that cuts it down quite a bit. So if you haven't tried it, give it a shot. At the end, you get $50. That's pretty good. For like an hour of your time, that's pretty good. You could donate that $50 to a charity if you want to, or you can get a burrito. I hear there's a good one just outside the Capitol.
You might have hit the true motivation. My wife is terrified of giving blood or anything to do with it, but she's cheap. So $50. I'm just going to advocate. If that's the holdup here, let's set the money aside, right? Because she would do it.
I will say, Rich, that like just last Friday, the New York Times released a piece that discussed how like middle-class people are beginning to donate plasma. And I'm like, okay, finally, good, right? Yeah. There was, and maybe still is to some extent, a kind of stigma surrounding donating plasma. I've never understood why there is any stigma whatsoever. You should feel good about donating plasma. Yet you get $50, that's like a win-win, that's an added bonus. But in the end, you're like providing medicine that treats people like Casey and other patients around the world whose lives depend on these medicines. So you should be proud if you've donated plasma. And if you get $50, fantastic, even better.
Yeah, I just want to come back to the safety piece because I'm a scientist, that's what I do, so I'm driven by data. PPTA, along with collaborations, has published quite a few articles, journal-approved academic articles, showing just how safe plasma donation is at different frequencies. Right now, we're just about to start this multi-year, multi-million-dollar study looking at the impact of plasma donation on the well-being and health of the donor. It's something that's happening in Europe as well. Why are we doing that? We're doing that to emphasize what Peter's just said. One in millions and millions and millions may have what we would call some sort of adverse event. Most people, if they have any kind of reaction, it could be a slight little kind of going cold, a little bit of tingling, maybe some slight fainting. But that's something.
Yeah, that's me. Just FYI.
Yes.
When
That's
I
the
donate
Peter
plasma, I had to have ice on
Or
my
tears.
chest or whatever.
Yeah,
so
that's
there
my
you
wife.
go.
But that's why we have the regulations. That's why we have things like saline administration. PPTA has global standards that really control all this. So when we go back to like California, the benefit is not for the safety of the donor at this point because those standards and those regulations are already decades old. It's more about how do we streamline and align California's regulations to be more specific to source plasma collection. So,
Well, I tell all my interns all the time, when you finish a story, you always need to finish it looking forward, like what's next. So let's stay there for a bit, and James, we'll stay with you. What do you hope to see in the future for plasma-derived medications?
I think there's been, when I think about the whole medication spectrum, right? We think about the medication that Casey takes. We have albumin, which is the most prevalent protein in our bodies. That's used in the wars. It's been used in Ukraine right now. It's been used in emergency rooms. It's been used for burns. Immunoglobulins, which are basically if you have either a primary immune deficiency, which means genetically your body's not developing an immune system and or immune response, these medications on a frequency basis when you can be administered it, top up your immune system so a cold doesn't turn into a bronchial infection that puts you in the hospital. Then you have a big piece that PPTA is working on is the patients who are going through, for example, cancer treatment. Cancer treatment, especially things like chemotherapy, CAR T therapy, they have a real impact to someone's immune system. They not only wipe out the cancer cells, they wipe out your immune system. So immunoglobulins are used heavily off-label, and we're pushing for on-label advocacy for that, but are used off-label to help patients as they go through a very scary process of treatment for cancer. I think there are obviously so much research and development that the companies are doing. There are estimated thousands, 10,000 proteins in the human blood. Do we know exactly what every single one does, how they interact with them? No, that's called research and development. I think the founding starting material that we have is plasma, right? If we don't have enough plasma, as we understand new indications, new uses for these very established medicines or new medicines made from plasma, we need to make sure we have the foundational starting material. And I think, as I said, in California, we have a somewhat unique end-to-end, vein-to-vein supply chain. We're able to collect it, we're able to put it in a warehouse and store it, we're able to test it, and we're able to manufacture it into medicines and then distribute it throughout California patients. So that's my hope. I think California, with the AB 2009, if we can get through this and we can have engagement with regulators and the Department of Health and policymakers here, we're going to be able to kind of really explain the big picture, as I hope I've tried to do today.
Great. Peter, I'll ask the same question. What's the future look like from your perspective?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is James mentioned just one of the medicines made from plasma, immunoglobulin. And he told you what it's used for. For about half the people who rely on immunoglobulin, they need it in order to live. Like without it, they wouldn't be able to survive. There is no alternative medicine for people like that, not yet. That one medicine, the demand growth for that one medicine is 6 to 8% going forward into the future every single year. Okay? Is Europe collecting 6 to 8% more plasma every single year? Answer, sadly, no. In Canada, demand for this one medicine went up 10% last year. In Spain, it went up over 20% in just 1 year, right? Australia, it's around 5%, right? 6 to 8% every single year. Where is that plasma going to come from? Is it going to come from Australia? I don't think so. It's going to come from here in the United States. But I hope that in the future, more countries adjust their rules and collect more plasma. I hope California changes its rules too, to make it easier to collect plasma here as well. And speaking of research and development, I study the ethics and the economics of the global blood plasma industry. A team along with me, we started the Georgetown Blood and Plasma Research Group in order to tell people about this data, about the numbers that I shared with you today. People are surprised, they're shocked. On Twitter, I guess it's called X now, on these, like, every once in a while, somebody from Australia will chime in and say, oh, well, in Australia, it's milk and cookies, and people donate for free, it's milk and cookies. And I'm able to say, oh, those milk and cookies are good for 48% of your needs. The rest you've got to import from the United States. When my fellow Canadians are like, we don't pay for plasma, it's actually not true. The rules are changing in Canada. Thank goodness, that's from my Canadian friends. But they too don't collect enough. And I hope that in the future, more countries collect enough plasma, and I hope that we have enough plasma for all the patients around the world who depend on it, like Casey, like others.
Well, Casey, let me come to you then. What do you hope to see in the future?
I hope to see more people coming to understand how truly important plasma is in general. I think there's a lack of basic awareness still. Like myself, I didn't know before I was diagnosed with alloimmunization what plasma even was, or a plasma-derived medicine that I received. So I hope my family's story will inspire someone to go out and give plasma and donate. And like my friends over here were mentioning, that other people with more significant and chronic conditions rely on plasma every day, more so than I even did. It's important in my life, but for other people, it's way more important as well. So plasma is definitely very powerful. So everyone should look into donating.
Well, on that note, we have some time. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? We've got some very smart people up here if you would like to throw a question at them. I have one if someone, oh, you do.
Peter, so you're talking about the demand growing. Can you talk about why? Like you gave examples in Spain and other countries and here too. So can you talk about why?
Yeah, James mentioned at least one cause, which is that the novel cancer treatments basically exchange cancer for secondary immune deficiency, right? Which is a bargain that I would take, a bargain that like everybody should take. So growth in demand for immunoglobulin is partly a result of the novel cancer treatments. In some of the lower and middle income countries, we're beginning to have more newborn screening of babies that are born. These are rare diseases that I'm talking about that are really difficult for doctors and others to spot. As you expand newborn screening, we discover that the rate of people with primary immune deficiencies, with some of the other ailments that are treated by plasma, that the prevalence of those is exactly the same as they are in the United States. And so as those countries improve their healthcare systems, they discover that they need plasma more and more. Those are just a few. There's other causes too, but those are, among the biggest ones.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. There's a question here, Greg.
Thank you. You spoke quite a bit about kind of the more, I'll say, more stringent regulations in California compared to other states. Do we see any reciprocal benefit as it pertains to donor safety, patient safety, anything like that? Or is it just regulation for regulation's sake?
I mean, I think our industry is pretty established in terms of the safety threshold, I would say. As I said, I've been to many donor centers in many different countries, and fundamentally, there are nuances, right? For example, in China, there's a requirement that a donor has to have a chest X-ray every year because they're looking for any kind of TB, any kind of heart that may not come up, and that's not a requirement in the US. But fundamentally, we have questionnaires, we have physician-led screening processes, we have processes that monitor the donor's safety and eligibility. We take their protein levels, right? What are we doing? We're taking protein out of a donor, out of a human, in order to be able to provide that protein manufactured and sterilized down the road. So we have to make sure the donor has enough protein fundamentally in order to be able to donate. So I think, Alex, to your point, I think we have the threshold already, and I think the data shows that. I think whether the ethical conversation in Europe or in Canada versus the US, fundamentally, the process of allowing a donor to donate to make sure they're safe and monitor them after the fact is exactly the same. So I think it's a regulatory, it's a separation of acknowledgement of our industry versus different clinical requirements within California and medical requirements. So.
I'm curious about education here. As you said, there was a lot of stuff you didn't know. From a educational standpoint, maybe, how big of a role would that play in terms of having the public have a greater understanding of what plasma donation is, what the need is, how they can go about, participating? What would that mean to somebody like you, who's not a scientist, but obviously has been touched by this?
Yeah, it would mean a lot, and I think that would go very far. I remember in high school there would be blood drives coming through, and blood's very important too. Plasma's right up there. So if public education would touch even on one little bit of how important plasma is, just hearing one small story like my own, I think it could make a difference. People always remember someone's experience or hearing about someone's experience that they can learn from, and or even if they do have a blood donation, say, hey, by the way, plasma too, kind of.
I'll ask you guys the same question though too. I mean, this is obviously something that would benefit you guys as well. Any thoughts on an education component, particularly when it comes to regulatory or legislative efforts in this area?
Yeah, I the reason I've probably been in this industry for nearly 2 decades is I remember when I first started, I knew nothing about this industry. I worked in the lab, so we tested plasma, we tested the product to make sure it was safe. But then after a few months, a patient came in, and this patient was a 12-year-old boy, and he suffered from severe immune deficiency. not boy in the bubble, but very much like that. And at the same time, another young girl came in, I think she was about 14, and she suffered from hemophilia, severe hemophilia. She spent her ages from 7 to 12 on the couch because her knee had swelled up from internal bleeds. That kind of image in my head has kept me very, invested in this. So I think that the opportunity for us to continue to do that is one of the reasons I now am part of the industry's voice, right? PPTA is the voice of this industry, and what we do is we advocate. We have a strong presence in DC where we talk to the Congress people throughout DC to get their support, to get their understanding, and this is exactly, and if I'm able to apply my learnings and my education to the greater awareness for the sake of the patients, then all the better.
Yeah.
I've worked in DC. You have my sympathy.
I don't live there, though.
I live in DC. Sympathies? Okay.
Oh, no, dealing with Congress is all I know.
Oh,
I love
yeah,
DC.
no.
That's one of my favorite cities in the world.
I don't go to Congress at all. Okay. Yeah, in terms of education, I think I'm always surprised. I talk to my students about plasma, and I'm always surprised by how many people had never heard of it. Mm-hmm. Like they know so little about it. And maybe it's because the diseases and the ailments that it treats are often like very, very rare diseases. Maybe patients with these kinds of rare diseases are sometimes ignored. So it would be good, even though like the 1,247 plasma collection centers in the United States, that's more than Costco stores in this country. Everybody knows about Costco, but not everybody knows about plasma donation. It's more than Kohl's department stores. Is that something in California, Kohl's? Yeah. Firehouse Subs, there's more plasma centers in the US than like Firehouse Subs locations. And yet still, every single year, I talk to my students, and they're like, I've never heard of plasma before. So I do think a little bit of education on that side would help quite a bit. And I think knowing a little bit more about the patients with these rare diseases would be helpful too, like what it's for. I talk to people and they say, the plasma that's used for makeup. Are you kidding me? Like, it's not used for makeup, right? Kim Kardashian got that facial or whatever, and this is what everybody thinks plasma donate. That's not what it's for. Right? The plasma that is collected is manufactured into life-saving therapies. It's not used for makeup. Okay, a little bit of education here.
I did not think we'd be talking about a Kardashian here today. I might have said no. I don't know. Anyway, any other questions here? Okay.
About the Kardashians?
Please don't make me talk about that. Okay. Actually, one last thing, just for a takeaway for folks.
Yeah.
What would be the first steps if somebody is inspired by this and they say, hey, I think I want to donate? What would be a good first step for somebody to take, other than searching the hinterlands to try to find a plasma center?
Searching the hinterlands, just go on Google Maps, type in plasma. I do this every city. I checked yesterday, I think Sacramento has 4 plasma collection centers, not too far away. So like later tonight when the day is done, you guys can all go donate plasma in Sacramento. You should also look up what you should do before you donate plasma as well. Make sure you hydrate. Make sure you drink a lot of water before you donate plasma. Yeah.
Is there anybody that shouldn't donate? Is there like a...
There's always some people who shouldn't. Depends on your weight. Depends on a number of
medical
history
factors. And things.
Your medical history is important too, but when you go to the plasma center, they'll defer you if it's not safe for you to donate plasma.
Okay.
And a lot of that information is on the websites as well, depending on the company. So, it's definitely there.
All right. I think we're getting close on time, so I'm just going to say thank you to everyone, particularly the panel. For coming and sharing all your insights today. I really appreciate that. I've learned a lot, so that's one. And for everyone who came here today, really appreciate that too. It's very clear plasma is not just a scientific issue. It's not just a policy issue. It's very much a human issue, as we can see here. Families, patients, our kids, very, very important aspect of our lives. You guys have made it pretty clear that California maybe needs to step up a little bit, and there's some opportunity to do that. So I don't advocate for legislation, I only report on it, but you guys have made a pretty good case on it. And the one thing I will say is, all of this stuff is data and et cetera, but all of it also is real people. I've had a couple of friends who have dealt with cancers, various cancers, leukemias, and et cetera, that these things were the difference between them being here and not. So I know how important it is too. Obviously, it's touched your family very deeply. So thank you all again. And if you do think of any questions, you can tackle them as they leave the room and get them to respond to you. So, all right, I think we're done.
Thank you, Rich.
All right.